Hey there. So for this reading, I believe we're going to be reading multiple different energies that are at play at a single situation. This feels like it may be a romantic partnership for a lot of people, but take it how it resonates. If, you hear what I'm saying and you feel like, okay, this makes sense in the context of, more of a platonic or work relationship, like, feel free to apply it as and where it makes the most sense. But we are going to kind of look at the dynamic between these two people. So I have an oracle deck here to kind of like set the scene. And then I've got a few different tarot decks, and I'm going to pull from each of the decks for the different energies to kind of like look at the way that each energy is contributing to the situation and notice any patterns or similarities that may come out. So, to kind of set the scene with our oracle deck, we have Rose, Crack Open, and Marshmallow, a Spoonful of Sugar. So, this feels like a dynamic that is accompanied with a breakthrough. Like when this energy enters your life, there's some kind of like aha moment, some kind of like breakthrough. And I think with this being like the overall energy of the situation with this oracle deck, that's something that's felt on like both ends. It may be in like different categories, like maybe one person through conversation has like, a breakthrough about, the unhealthy relationship they've developed with food. And the other person, has some revelation about like, oh, I haven't been fully investing myself in my art. Like it can be different things, but I think with like the spoonful of sugar here, it's something specifically about something that's like important to you that you've either been denying yourself or like felt like wasn't an option or maybe like treated as like frivolous. So this could definitely be like something related to hobbies, interests, just something that is actually really important to you. um but I think is often like maybe reduced to something more trivial by other people. Because like marshmallow as a plant, I mean, we all like know the association with marshmallows, and sweet things in that case. But there's also like a lot of history and also medicinal qualities to marshmallow as well. So it's like whatever this is that you have this like breakthrough about, there is this sense of that being connected to something that, regardless of whether or not you dismiss it based on like stereotypes or associations, is actually very important to you, and I think is a positive thing in your life, whether that's something that you're inspired to like engage with more as a result, or maybe cut back on something that was like preventing you from engaging with other things that were meaningful. Just like that kind of energy of like bringing a little bit more like sweetness, a little bit more softness, a little bit more of what you might call the icing on the cake. Literally a cake here. um so I'm gonna start with like the energy of the collective that is watching this. Um, all three of you. um, let's see how your energy is showing up and being perceived in this situation. King of Pentacles. Okay. Okay. Oh, I feel like someone thinks King of Wands. Damn, like you. It's like I gotta qualify this because people take these terms and run with them. Like there's definitely masculine energy here, but not necessarily as in you are perceived as a masculine person, but masculine energy in the sense of like being able to take action, being able to take ownership, being able to handle yourself, handle the situations that you're in. I think this person looks at you and thinks that, you handle potentially like your money, your home, your career, like something about that. They really respect the way that you have managed that. It's like even if you don't have a lot, you make sure you have what you need. And, potentially even like making sure that other people have what they need too. And so it's like you're also hearing like you make the little things feel luxurious. Like I'm being drawn to like this image of the King of Pentacles. He's kind of like he's wearing this nice like suit here and kind of like adjusting his cuff or something. And you can see just like that like watch, you know, poking out. And I'm hearing like the line from the Tyler Childers song, "Eating Big Time," where yeah, he says something like $1,000 watch is fine enough flex for me. Which he's kind of talking about like making it big, but like in the sphere of like big rich musicians, like $1,000 watch is honestly not that big of a deal. But to a kid from like this poor background, it's like a huge deal, and like that's enough. I think that you're seen as someone who like like values the things that you have, but it's like, even if you were a millionaire and you had all of this, your biggest splurge would be like the $1,000 watch as opposed to, like the $10,000 watch or the, $100,000 watch. And I think that like there's something about the way that your energy and your spirit like matches up with your like physical surroundings, appearance, something about like your energy presents like very, very like one to one with the way that you live your life, the way that you present yourself. There's like this sense of like consistency. And I think that like that is something that is liked, that is like admired. Like you don't shy away from that, and you again, I'm hearing like you know how to do a lot with a little. You know how to do a lot with a little. And I think that this person who looks at you understands that that's because you have this like indomitable soul. You have this like sense of, you're going to create or like manifest the life that you have, from nothing because, you know what you deserve, you know what you want. What else about your energy? Four of Cups, Four of Swords, Queen of Swords. So I think that like you maybe like seen as someone who is, I think, like very like strategic about the way that you engage with other people. It's like you have this ability to say when like enough's enough. I need some rest. I need to reconnect. I need, like my meditation time, whatever that is. And I think that like this person thinks that you do this like very intelligently and like very well, and like almost sees that structure as, like a big sustaining factor in the way that you show up, is like this ability to set boundaries like related to rest, and the ability to like disconnect from situations and not just like continually get to the point of like burning yourself out over things that you can't control. I think this person also thinks that you're very smart, um and then that's something that maybe other people don't always see or like fully appreciate, um but it still shows. Even when you're not trying to, it still shows. Even when you're trying to just like have a chill conversation, and you think you're just being, kind of like whatever, lazy. I think that this person is still sitting here and thinking like, wow, like you're so smart, and you do all of this, while putting in almost no effort. Like that just makes it like more impressive. That just makes it more impressive. Page of Pentacles, Five of Pentacles, Knight of Pentacles. I think that, like, in spite of, this person looking at you and thinking that, like, you know how to do a lot with a little, it's like, along with that realization, like, comes the understanding that, in a lot of ways, I think, like, life hasn't always given you much, especially, like, maybe in the physical realm. Like, with this Five of Pentacles, I think it's most likely either, like, some kind of, like, health issue, recurring health struggles, or some struggles, like, financially, materially. um and I think that, like, there's this sense of, and yet you persist, and yet you persist. um and this sense of, almost like, this person would, like, wish for better for you if, they were given that power. And there's kind of this sense of, admiring the way that you persist and that you don't give up, even with, like, these recurrent issues. Like, I'm hearing, like, eye on the prize, and, like, she's just in there, like, looking at it. And I think that this person, like, also recognizes that even the things that you struggle with, like, it used to be worse, and they, like, saw the way, even if they weren't physically present, there is, like, this sense, I think, from conversation, most likely, um conversation vibes of, like, you're someone who has, like, sort of picked yourself up off the ground before, and, like, you can do it again, but, like, you shouldn't have to. I don't know, is there anything that this person doesn't care for about you? This feels like a very positive thing. um I'm, like, waiting for the other shoe to drop in this reading. Ten of Wands, Eight of Wands. I think that they not necessarily, like, oh, they dislike this, as in they dislike you here, but I think that they, dislike how quick you are to, like, take responsibility for any energy in the vicinity. Like, I think that you, with that, like, Ten of Wands, sometimes, like, may take on a lot from the people and situations around you. And, there's not necessarily, again, like, the reasoning behind why you do it is what they dislike, but it's almost like, sort of like, seeing that happen. She's, like, literally bending over, like, in pain. It's like, I think they don't like seeing that. Don't like seeing that. Um, Knight of Cups. Someone just wants to be, like, like, Prince Charming here. I'm hearing, like, showing up for you, like, taking on some of your burdens in the way that, like, you do for other people. I think that they think that you have a lot of that kind of energy. But it's kind of like they dislike that you don't always, like, get that in return. There's the sense of, like, well, that's not fair. Well, that's not fair. Well, you did that. Yeah, it's almost like this person is, like, in some ways, feels like more protective over your energy than you are. I think that, it's like they respect what you do and they respect the choices that you make, but they don't respect the people who, put burdens on you without offering anything in return. Kind of vibe. So that's a fun, kind of interesting. It feels like, a connection with someone who's got some opinions. There's, like, a lot of, kind of, like, clarity and a little bit of, like, sass coming through. With this, with the whole, it's not that I dislike what you do, it's that I dislike people who do it to you. Like that's kind of pedantic, honestly, but you know, I'm a pedantic person at heart, so I'm here for it. I want to know, like, what can you tell me about this person? You know, and how they are showing up in this instance, what emotions, intentions, etc. would the collective benefit from knowing? Ace of Cups. So this is something like fairly new. Emperor. So we also have some like masculine energy over here, which again, you know, doesn't necessarily mean man, woman, anything, other than someone who owns their own power, you know, is not afraid to take action, someone who, you know, understands the whole with great power comes great responsibility type thing. Um, with the Ace of Cups, again, it's like someone who is like these feelings feel new. You know, if this is someone that you know or have known, it's not someone who you had like feelings for before or someone who expressed like feelings for you before. You know, this is either like a new development in an old dynamic or like a completely new dynamic. Um, as far as this goes. And I think like with that Emperor coming out there, that's like kind of confirmation that it's like if this, you know, is someone that you know and they did have feelings for you in the past, they would have said something. This feels like someone who, you know, would say something. Um and I feel like there's kind of a sense of, yeah, I was going to say kind of a sense of uncertainty on their part about what you're feeling. And I think if, you know, with this being sort of like a new development, it's not something where I think like there's been like confirmation. 'Cause the moon, the devil, and the two of cups. And I think that this person, you know, has like some anxieties or doubts that can be kind of like paralyzing in this instance. I want to know like why. Why? This card literally fell into the trash can. Upright or reversed? Reversed. Seven of Wands reversed. The Sun, Nine of Wands. You know, this feels. I'm hearing this feels too good to be true. This feels suspicious. You know, I feel like this is someone who almost like didn't expect you to let down your guard with that like seven of wands being all about like, you know, being like guarded in the energy, and that like flipping off the table into the trash can in reverse. It's like, you know, this unexpected just like, okay, yeah, let's lower my guard, let's, yeah, sure. You know, maybe like just like the way that you show up and like the responsiveness there is like almost like a huh, I didn't expect that, you know. And I kind of see them as like this person in this Nine of Wands is kind of given like a little suspicious side eye, you know, like leaning against that wand, like clearly very tired, very exhausted, but just like, you know, suspiciously side eyeing this like sun card, like this positive vibe, like, I don't know. I don't know if I trust it, you know, and I don't think that this is like a mistrust of you. I think that this is almost like a sense of not being sure like how to read the situation. You know, it's giving like, do you let your guard down because you're someone who's just like really open and free and, you know, radiant, which is great, or do you let your guard down because you know, are trying to get into more of this like, you know, two of cups attraction energy. I think that there's like some uncertainty about that, and like that maybe preventing this person from taking action. Tell me more about that. Seven of Swords, Ace of Wands, the Lovers. No, this is not someone who has told you that they find you attractive. but they find you attractive. There's, a kind of like sense of, are you gonna say it? Am I gonna say it? Like this will they won't they type of vibe. Um but I also think that like there is this sense of like some of that like kind of coming through anyways. It's like even when it's not said, it's like felt. And I think that there's kind of like a back and forth like balance dynamic with the energy here. um the Ace of Cups, the Two of Cups, the Lovers, the Ace of Wands, they are feeling some type of way. They are feeling some type of way. What are they going to do about it? Four of Pentacles, the World, Knight of Pentacles. Interesting. There's something here about like maintaining control up until a certain point. This is sort of like moving carefully, like, very much considering, the cost of a misstep. But with this Four of Pentacles, this kind of feels, I mean, it's like holding on tightly, maybe holding back a little bit. And then, we hit this world. There's like some kind of like milestone, some kind of cycle that's completed, something that comes full circle um, in your life or theirs. With this Knight of Pentacles here being kind of all about like this diligence, this patience, and Pentacles as the material element, I think that that could be, something like a breakthrough, like milestone, in terms of work, living situation, kind of the energy of something that almost like without that present, this or like completed or whatever that is, it could be something as simple as like, oh, you've been working in another town, for a month, and you're gonna, relocate to this town at the end of the month. Or you've been dealing with they've been dealing with a bunch of like, renovations on their home that are like going to be complete soon, and once those are complete, it's like there's this sense of like making space, like making sure that there is like a stable foundation, that they're not jumping into anything until it is stable. But with that like Knight of Pentacles there, it does feel like a slow and steady wins the race. There's a lot of consideration here. I would even go as far as to say like some caution, but it doesn't feel fear motivated at all. It feels more like this sense of like caring a lot about, the potential stability of the connection of your life, of their life, and like this sense of feeling like they have like the green light to move forward. And then when they do, in a way that is very sustainable, there's like big feelings here, but there's also like this sense of not rushing any of that. There's like a lot of like patience to this energy. I like that actually. Um, because this doesn't feel like fearful making excuses type of vibe. This feels more like, okay, I'll ask you out once my car is out of the shop because then I can actually offer to come pick you up type of a vibe. Like it's more practical than emotional in terms of like their considerations for, how and when they might talk about this. Um, so we got that. I kind of now want to, if you've had like a reading from me about multiple energies, you'll know like I often like to like sum it up at the end with like another deck. I know a lot of decks. Um to kind of like have a more like integrated perspective, like spirit's perspective of it. That kind of like ties the energies together and, charts the path forward. So, we're going to use this deck for that and kind of get our little bird's eye view of the situation and see what Spirit would advise for these two energies and this collective. Knight of Wands, Muse of Wands, and in this deck we don't have kings, we have muses. These are all sideways, and those sort of represent a non-traditional approach to like masculinity. But that would be the King of Wands in like a traditional tarot. And, I'd say with that, like the Muse and the Knight, I think there's something about like letting yourself get inspired, letting yourself get excited about this connection. It's like if this is the connection for you, it's not going to be something that just leaves you like sitting anxious and afraid the whole time. It's like something that rouses your energy. Yeah, like strength here, something that like you feel adds to your conviction, adds to your perspective, as opposed to being something that generates fear. Because I mean, if you look at this strength card, there's woman on the back of the lion. Is a very big lion, and under normal circumstances, you would expect someone in that case to be afraid of it, but she's not. She's not. And, that's kind of in line with what I was getting, from the energy of like there being a sense of like caution, a sense of respect, but not fear. And that feels like very relevant here. Nine of Cups. I think that this, like, if this is your reading and, you're looking for the advice here, this is like a connection that really fortifies like your individual sense of self. Like, yes, once this, maybe moves into like a real connection, this feels more sort of like consideration of that. I don't know if this is your just like deep dive before you jump in, home inspection type reading. But there's something here about like this being something it's like, yeah, the connection is great, but also like the fact that it like uplifts you personally, even outside of your time with this person. You feel more yourself, you feel more, stable in your energy. There's this sense of like, this is not the person where it's like, oh my God, I only feel good when they're around, and the rest of the time I'm just like an empty shell. This is like someone who leaves your cup feeling full. So you tell me about the trajectory of this connection, what to expect, or, recommended actions to take. Three of Cups, the High Priestess, Justice, the Lovers, and Temperance. If you know, you know. There's definitely this sense of, you don't need to rush this. You don't need to rush this. And I think that, with this Three of Cups coming out, you know, first and foremost, I think that there is something about like allowing the friendship part of this dynamic to blossom, whether this is someone that, you eventually want to collaborate with, in a career sense, whether this is someone that you want to partner with. I think that there's a lot of wisdom in seeing and understanding how you relate to this person, just like as a person first, and like seeing all the different sides of them. I think that there's something about the timing of this being something that, I mean, like I said, doesn't rush you, but like also doesn't leave you with as much ambiguity going forward. Because I think that, like, first and foremost, with the High Priestess coming out here, you have like a strong sense about this person. You have like this intuitive, maybe pull or, confirmation there. Maybe this is that. Maybe that's why you're here. Um, but with justice, coming out immediately followed by the lovers, it's like justice is the cold hard facts. The high priestess is the hunch, and justice is, the fingerprints that, back that up, kind of a thing. And I think that if you're trusting your intuition and like allowing things to unfold at their own pace, like those smoking guns will become, obvious. I think in this case, it's less of a like hold off because you're missing a red flag and more like let spirit show you that your intuitive sense about this was not off base. Um, and I think definitely like potential for some kind of connection that does feel like very balanced and authentic. Um, especially with like temperance and the lovers. That's a lot of like energy of harmony and balance and like equal give and take. Um, which I really like. Justice, the lovers, and temperance all have like various flavors of connotation relating to balance. So this is definitely not someone who just like completely destroys your balance, just feels like, a huge burden and an anxiety. Not to say that like, everything's always easy when you find the one, because it doesn't work that way. But this does feel like the energy of kind of like enough patience to come back around, enough patience to return to a softer place, enough patience to, you know, stick it out through all of the phases. I kind of like, in this Three of Cups that we have here, we see this depiction of, sort of this three-faced figure who has these like various, phases of the moon in her hand. And then, we have the high priestess here who also has a moon. And then we look at, temperance here. Um, and there's like a even fuller span of the phases. And from that, I'm getting that like it's like the different pieces will be revealed to you, and I think that if you like choose to enter a connection of whatever kind with this person, that that kind of puts it all together, like puts it all into perspective, because it's like we have some of the moon here, we have some of it here, some of it we're kind of getting understanding this person from a friendship perspective, some of it is just sort of like this intuitive knowing, but when you kind of like put that together and allow that to build and grow, it's like, okay, now we've got the full span, now we've got like the whole picture. So is there anything that you can tell me about maybe like timing here? Because I know we're talking about being patient, but I don't know like any timing or like situations that might trigger, proceed, involved with shifts in this connection. Five of Cups, Three of Swords. They both came out sideways. It's upright reversed. Now, this one is upright. Five of Cups upright. And the Three of Swords reversed. This feels like a loss, but not a heartbreak. With this like Five of Cups here, it's like there is like some type of loss, but there's in the image here, it's like everything's like frozen over. It's like frozen over, and there's like a little drip of water, but for the most part, it's like it's not, something. I'm hearing like something that, like maybe under different circumstances would have gotten to you or like gotten to you in the past, or something about, situation that you're in personally. Um, that does involve some kind of tangible loss. It could be something as simple as like, oh, quit my job, but I don't really feel that sad about it. Like, I don't feel super broken up. Like, yeah, I'll miss the job, but, I already have a better offer. So, yeah, like, I'll miss my coworkers, but I'm excited to be, doing something that I enjoy more or like getting better pay. And I think that like whatever this situation is not necessarily like related to this person specifically in your life. I'm getting this is sort of just like a synchronicity, like trigger moment, um, where you realize that you're not as like broken up about something. And sometime around then, I feel like there may be some shift taking place. Um, what is that most likely shift or outcome, please? And thank you. Queen of Wands, Two of Cups. Well, I think someone might want to tell the Queen of Wands what they are feeling. Share some feelings there. Yeah, the Knight of Cups. Prince Charming coming out again, and then we also got the Knight of Swords. Um, so like that might even be something that is like comes like somewhat like quickly or emotionally, not like in a bad way, but in a very like heartfelt way. I do like that we got two knight cards there because knights are action cards, which definitely seems like something in this situation. Maybe your time, your energy, something, your anxiety freed up from, whatever you lost but weren't heartbroken about. That like making space for that Knight of Swords and Knight of Cups to act on that emotion, to kind of like bring that cup to the Queen of Wands and, see what she says. So, I mean, you can take that how it resonates, and do what you will with that offer, with that energy. But this does feel like a very genuine sentiment and, a person who does, think highly of you. So doesn't necessarily say anything about what you think of them, but, I think that whatever you do, this is not someone that's gonna like then turn around and like hate you or disrespect you. I think that there's still like, fundamental respect for like who you are as a person. So I think, do whatever feels right to you, whatever you feel guided to do, as the Queen of Wands, Queen of Inspiration, whatever you're inspired to do in this situation, and I think it'll work out just fine. Not much here that feels like it needs further attention. So yeah, hopefully that helped, and best of luck out there.